Greetings, students. Over the next 3 lectures, we're going to go ahead and talk about the major religions of the world. And I want to be really clear when we're taking a look at these religions. Number one, we're not going to hit on every single religion in the world. We're going to try to hit all the big ones, the ones that have tens of millions of people that partake in them. 2, we are looking at these as an overall movement, as we'll take a little bit closer look as we move along in this semester. All religions have multiple interpretations and quite often multiple groups or subsets, what we often call sects or denominations within them. And so we're going to just try to capture the main beliefs, the main practices of each one. And if you practice one of these and you're like, wait a second, that doesn't sound like how I practice my religion, just keep in mind that this is not a deep dive into each religion. This is just to make sure that we have a basic understanding. As we move through the world, we will look a little bit more closely at most of the ones that we're going to be reviewing over the next 3 videos. Now, just a quick word on how we're going to be looking at these religions. We're going to break them down into Eastern religions and Western religions. And of course, this is an artificial distinction. This is something that a lot of social scientists and a lot of people that study religions will look at, not necessarily because all the Eastern religions are grouped together, but as we will see, because all the Western religions come from the same root. They have a very similar take on how the world was created, how it's going to end, and the same basic moral structure. Eastern religions are nowhere near as unified. There's a few that come out of India that have similar beliefs, like the idea of reincarnation or being born again. But the religion of Japan, the home religion of Japan called Shinto that we'll be talking about, is not connected to Confucianism, which is not really connected to Buddhism any more than any religion is connected to each other. So just keep in mind, Eastern religions are essentially all the religions from India to the east in Asia. So religions from India, China, Southeast Asia, Japan. And Western religions all started in the Middle East, but they're primarily in the modern day practiced in the Middle East, in Central Asia, in Northern Africa, in Europe, and as we'll see, anywhere that Europe conquered. Now, there is an important term that has a few variations that you're going to need to be familiar with. You're going to hear this word quite a bit when we're talking about religion. And this is the term divinity. When we talk about divinity, we're really talking about anything that is related to a god or to gods. The word divine just essentially means godlike. So if you ever hear somebody taste something and go, oh, this is divine, they're really saying this is like what the gods would eat. Sometimes you'll hear the term the divine. And when you hear it phrased like that, it's really talking about the essence of a god or of the gods. And deity. Deity just means a god. So if we're talking about a deity, we are talking about a god. It's also going to be important to know when to capitalize God. This is one that students get a little confused on, but it's really pretty straightforward. If you write God with a lowercase g, you're really just talking about a divinity, about a deity, about something that is divine. This would be like when we're talking about Mars or Jupiter or any of the old Roman or Greek gods, or any of the gods of Native American religions. They are all deities. And that means it's not a proper noun. It's not the name of a god. It's just a god that exists. However, within Western religions, and in some Eastern religions, but primarily in Western religions, when the G is capitalized, when we're talking about the name of a god, and the name of that god is God, then you capitalize it. So when we're talking about God in Christianity, in Islam, in Judaism, the name of God, or the name of their God, is God. So a good way to think about this is the God of the Jewish people. We're just talking about a God, so it's lowercase g, is named God with a capital G. You also need to be familiar with the distinctions between members of the clergy and members of the laity. Sometimes you hear the term laymen or layfolk. When we talk about organized religions are organized by the clergy. The clergy are the priests, they're the preachers, they're the imams, they're the monks, they're the religious scholars. And the laity are the people that the clergy serve. So the laity are the people that are sitting in the congregations. They're the ones who are going to sermons. They're the ones that practice the religion, but they're not heads of the religion, or they're not speaking for the religion as the way clergy are able to do. So I'm just going to go ahead and list out the major religions that we're going to be looking at. In the West, we have Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. These religions all come from the same root, and we will make this clear in a couple videos. But they all worship the same God. They all call their God, God with a capital G. There are some different names within Judaism, within the Old Hebrew. The Old Hebrew didn't have the name God, but they did talk about Elohim or Yahweh. And in Islam, you've probably heard the term Allah. Allah is just the Arabic term for God. So like Arab Christians and Arab Jews, when they talk about their God in Arabic, they call their God Allah. It's the same name, just a different language. Over in the East, we have quite a few more, sometimes connected, but not always, religions. Shinto is the primary religion of Japan. Confucianism had come out of China. And we'll come back to this, but Confucianism sometimes isn't called a religion. It's just called a philosophy. For our purposes, though, it's a religion. And it's prevalent in not just China, but in Korea and Japan and in Vietnam. Taoism or Taoism is the same religion. This is essentially China's folk religion, just as Shinto is Japan's folk religion, and we'll get deeper into it. And then both Buddhism and Hinduism came out of India. Both Buddhism and Hinduism believe in what we call reincarnation, or being reborn into a new body after you die. But in the modern day, Buddhism doesn't exist very much in India. There's not many Buddhists there. However, there are lots of Buddhists in places like Japan, the Koreas, China, and Southeast Asia. Hinduism is the largest religion in India, and it is where most Hindus live, is in India. But there are others in other parts of South Asia and even down in Southeast Asia. Not to mention, of course, we live in a globalized world now. We live in an interconnected world, so you can find just about anybody practicing any religion in just about any country. Now, there is one major distinction between Western and Eastern religions that we should be familiar with. Western religions have what we call linear view of the world. In other words, the world was created at some point, and we're going down this line, and at some point, we are going to be at the end of the world. And at least a couple of the Western religions believe in some type of a judgment day where people will either be sent to heaven or they'll be sent to some type of a hell. Judaism's a little different. Again, we'll come back to it. And the Eastern religions have a tendency to see the world through a cyclical view. In other words, within Eastern religions, the belief quite often is that the world was created, and the world is going through a cycle where, yes, it's going to go away at some point, but it will be reborn again. There will be a continual motion. The world doesn't stop. So linear in the West versus cyclical in the East. The other major difference is that Western religions are what we call monotheistic. They worship only one God. Eastern religions are a little bit more of a grab bag. Some of them are what we call polytheistic, so they worship multiple gods. Some of them are monotheistic, and some of them are even a little what we would call atheistic, or they don't necessarily believe in any gods. And there is some truth to this in Buddhism. Some Buddhists don't believe in any gods, others do. Some Confucianists don't believe in any gods, others do. And there is one belief system that we're actually going to get a little deeper into in this video, because it doesn't really fit into the Western or Eastern paradigm. Animism. Animism is simply the belief that everything in nature has some type of a spirit. So animals have spirits, plants, rivers, mountains. And you're probably somewhat familiar if you've heard of animism. Many Native American beliefs are examples of animism. As we'll see, there is plenty of animistic beliefs in places like Mongolia, in Southeast Asia, in parts of Africa. And animism is very important to at least have a little bit of a hold on, because it is in many ways the original religion. Before we get to the organized religions, before we get to the invention of Judaism and Christianity and Hinduism and Buddhism, human beings had a tendency to simply worship the world around them, to worship nature around them, to believe that there were active spirits all around the world creating the world they lived in. And not only did other religions essentially evolve out of that animistic belief, one of the religions we're going to be looking at, Shinto, is still pretty darn animistic. However, we do need to note that animism is not a unified religion. The beliefs of one Native American tribe is not going to be the same as the beliefs of another, let alone the beliefs of a tribe in Africa or in Mongolia. This is a word that we simply use to describe hundreds of different belief systems. You'll also sometimes hear the word indigenous religions, and this is simply talking about the religions of the tribal peoples that were in a place before usually Europeans came to conquer. All right, animism, the belief that everything has a spirit, the belief that nature has its own force. You need to understand it, but more important is going to be the next couple lectures where we're first going to look at Eastern religions, and then we'll take a look at Western religions.